Hello everyone and welcome to this tips and tricks video to Total War Thrones of Britannia. Now it's definitely not the hardest Total War to get into, but that doesn't mean that newcomers to this series are going to have an easy time. Since everyone has their own playstyle, I'm sure some of you will disagree with some of my tips and some others will have some very valuable tips of their own, so do feel free to share your opinion in the comments and do feel free to check the comments if you want additional tips. Now these are 5 tips that I find are very easy to follow and will greatly improve your success rate of the game. So do consider trying them out and hopefully they will help you beat that difficulty level that you are struggling on with right now. Do keep in mind that all the tips here are written for the release version of the game, so some of them might not be directly applicable for later versions, as EA might have changed or fixed some of them. Tip number 1. Know when to use autoresolve. Autoresolve is a great tool, especially since Rome 2. Before Rome 2, autoresolve was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it kept you sane because you didn't have to fight every tiny battle, but on the other hand, it was incredibly unreliable and you would sometimes lose battles that were absolutely in your favor. Since Rome 2, which even directly told you if you would win, autoresolve is very reliable, and as long as the power bar is even slightly in your favor, you will win. If the power bar is directly in the middle, you will probably want to fight the battle yourself though, just to be sure, and if it is even slightly in the enemy's favor, fighting the battle yourself or running away are your only options. If you can win a battle with autoresolve, you probably want to do that. Even if you are the better general and can win with less casualties, the autoresolve will probably give you the better results, and before you crucify me for making no sense, allow me to explain. Now there's 2 big advantages besides saving time that autoresolve brings by distributing the damage taken pretty much equally on all of your units, something that is absolutely impossible to achieve while fighting manually. In normal battles, your cavalry will probably take the most damage and is most likely to be destroyed even during victorious battles. This is followed by the front line, who takes the brunt of the enemy attack. Archers, on the other hand, tend to leave the battlefield undamaged unless the enemy manages to get into your flanks, in which case you might lose the whole unit. So the first advantage the autoresolve brings is the fact that you will basically never lose a unit in autoresolve while winning battles, something that quite easily happens in normal battles. This can still happen if your army contains units that are way more damaged than other units, but it is so unlikely that it can literally be ignored. The second advantage is that since the damage is distributed equally, the army needs less time to recover to full strength after the battle, since every unit heals X men per turn, depending on things like food and national modifiers, but not depending on the damage sustained or anything in that direction. An army with many slightly damaged units will recover much faster than an army with a single heavily damaged unit. As an example, let's take an army that recovers by 10 men per unit. If this army loses 100 men with 10 units having lost 10 men each, it will recover in 1 turn back to strength. But if the same unit only suffered 20 men casualties, but all of them on 1 frontline unit, then we'll need 2 turns to recover. So autoresolve tends to give the best outcome of battles. If the power bar is in your favor, you should use it, but only if you will have 1 to 2 turns of recovery after the battle. If multiple battles happen right after each other, the low casualty rate of manual battles will probably be preferable, just to win the other battles following. Tip number 2. The AI doesn't know when to attack. The Total War AI was always its downfall, and it is worse in Throne of Britannia than it has ever been. I honestly think that the original Rome 2 at release AI was better than this one. The AI regularly attacks cities and armies that it just can't beat because it sometimes fails to correctly assess your army, and it always fails to correctly account for abnormalities like city walls or rivers or garrisons or something of that nature. You can easily use this to your advantage by moving into a defensible position. In this case, we can actually see the enemy AI just randomly attacking my city with an army that never could have defeated the garrison, not to mention that there is a full army inside. Here we see the enemy attacking a port, even though it is easily defended. Do keep in mind that all of these videos are made on legendary difficulty. To use this ability, basically all you have to do is constantly park your armies in well-defendable areas. They will probably not recognize the advantage the position gives you and attack you nonetheless. Do keep in mind that all rivers, mountains, cities and other terrain features from the world map will be represented on the battle map. In this case, I wasn't strong enough to beat the enemy's army, so I moved close to my city. The enemy actually did realize that he couldn't beat me with his city helping, so he moved on. But as I advanced behind the river, I didn't understand the huge advantage that a river gives and attacks me. Now the following attack was more than easy to fend off, and I destroyed the entire army. Tip number 3. Always attack the enemy's rear. This tip for the battlefield does sound simple, and it is. The modifiers the enemy units get for being attacked in the rear are huge for all units, and by simply always trying to accomplish just that, you will win battles that are extremely skewed against you. When the battle lines meet, the enemy will probably try to hit one of your sides harder than the other, trying to break through. Use this to move units from the other side into the opponent's rear. When drawing your battle line, try to draw it slightly longer than the enemy's line. This will mean that in an equal battle your center will be weaker, so you need to hurry with the enveloping motion of your troops, but once your units have enveloped the enemy, the negative modifier he gets make up for this many times. Cavalry needs to ride around the enemy, trying to destroy enemy archers, and then fall into the enemy's back. Arguably the falling into the enemy's back part is the more important one. Your archers should stand behind your line, but once the front lines are engaged, moving them around to shoot into the enemy's back is usually a good strategy, especially against heavily armored targets. Basically, if you have any unit that isn't doing anything, you should have it attack the enemy's rear. Freeing smaller stacks of units first to help with attacking the main front line's rear is usually the best way of going on about this. Don't have your formation be too rigid. If the enemy attacks with a single unit that are faster, like cavalry, don't be scared of breaking your front line in order to envelop these single units. Tip number 4. Give away estates and forget about the rest of politics. Politics in Total War games was never particularly well done, but in Thrones of Britannia it's literally just busy work. All of the actions in the bottom left corner cost a lot of money, lower your ruler's influence, and do barely anything positive. The only action that might ever be useful is divorce, and even that is usually not really important, so I won't get into it right now. The only character stat that actually matters is loyalty. If this reaches 0, the character will rebel, starting a civil war with parts of your forces, and this can be very dangerous, so let's not let that happen. The most important negative modifier to loyalty is -3 for estates being low. Estates are annoying, but easy to manage. Whenever you have a few estates to give away, the people with the least amount of estates get this modifier, and you need to give away estates. Keep in mind that you do not need to give the estates to exactly these people, but just that they shouldn't be in your own possession. Only the first estate will give a +2 modifier to loyalty. After that, estates increase the person's influence, but not the loyalty, except for getting rid of the estates being low modifier. So do make sure to give everyone at least one estate, and other than that, randomly distribute the rest of the estates. The -1 loyalty from being more influential than the ruler doesn't really matter, so I don't pay too close attention to who I give the rest of the estates to. One thing that can happen is if you forget to move your army during the turn for that army to take a town at the end of the turn, and if that town has an estate, this can lead to the -3 estates being low modifier being applied before the next turn. For this reason, I aim for a resting loyalty of 4, meaning that without the estates being low modifier, the character has 4 loyalty. That way, if I do forget, this character won't start a civil war the next turn, and it's also enough loyalty backup for multiple bad modifiers to hit the character in one turn. 4 is also usually the resting loyalty anyway without a bad wife, so except for on legendary difficulty, usually no skill points in priest are needed. On legendary, only 1 skill point in priest is needed, and 1 skill point won't break the bank. Tip number 5, army composition, or why medium tier units are bad. Now some units are more useful for auto-resolving and some units are more useful in actual combat, but medium tier units tend to be useless in both. One stack will cost as much as 2 to 3 full armies of cheap units, but it won't win against even 1.5 stacks of cheap units in auto or manual resolve. The best choice in the game are huge stacks of cheap units. This is true for every Total War game, and actually arguably the least true for this game because of the introduction of food, but it still holds true. 2 full stacks of cheap units will beat any single full stack, even including the strongest elite units, both in auto-resolve and in manual resolve if you follow the always envelop tactic. Since a single cheap unit is somewhere between 40 to 80 gold and a single super strong unit will be 200 to 350 gold, the single stack is about 2 to 3 times more expensive than the 2 cheap armies combined. Now this only holds true for fighting on the battlefield to some degree, because it takes about 2 to 3 cheap spear units to envelop and kill the strongest units like berserkers. And while 2 to 3 cheap spear units are way cheaper than a single stack of berserkers, which comes to a monthly upkeep of about 8 times that of a spear unit, since you can field a maximum amount of 40 units on the battlefield at any given time, if the enemy fights with 2 full armies, something that happens quite often in the late game, you cannot outnumber the enemy, and enveloping single stacks is not a possibility, causing your spearmen to be completely slaughtered on the battlefield. And the slowly trickling reinforcements from fighting with more than 40 stacks won't help this at all. In the late game, once money isn't really an issue anymore, if you can afford to make an extremely strong army, this can also be a very valid option, because the AI in the game tends to attack with single stacks after each other instead of simultaneously. Now, while the autoresolve is favoring large armies over strong armies, it does give extremely strong armies amazing results when fighting same-sized armies of the worse units. Meaning that the strong army that fights 5 weak armies one after the other will barely take losses. Now I hope you guys enjoyed this video, I hope you maybe learned something from it and it might help you in your future playthroughs. If you do have better tips or more tips or different tips or something, do let me know in the comments. Also let me know if you agree or disagree with these ways of handling it. And if you did enjoy the video and you would like to see more of it, do consider hitting that thumbs up button or subscribing. It really does mean a lot to me. Thank you everybody, and I'm gonna see you for the next video. Bye bye.